Hi, I'm Kayla.
I'm Aspen.
I'm Roy. We're seniors at Liberty High School. We are here to present our interpretation of the Service Learning Project from our senior capstone class.
Senior Capstone is a course offered at Liberty, and it highlights the importance of education, not only for the individual, but for the masses as well. This class often shows the impact of education in a variety of situations, and one of our end-of-the-year requirements for this course is that we create a service learning project.
Okay, so the Service Learning Project is typically like an 8-page paper about different forms of community service and how it benefits the community. But we decided that it would be more universally beneficial if we created a video that involved some different types of people from our school. So the video is going to discuss a wide variety of topics that relate to education and how the education can be applied in everyday situations. The following clips that we are going to present to you are excerpts from interviews with teachers, capstone alumni, current capstone students, and future capstone students.
Education really means everything to me, to be honest. I complain about it a lot, but I realize how lucky I am to be able to come to this school every day and to have it be 5 minutes away from me and to have it be free and to come and get the same education as everyone else who's sitting around me. And I think I'm really lucky to be able to have that.
Almost everything. As you might tell, I've had quite a bit. I believe education is a lifelong learning. I mean, you start out in high school and you never finish learning. I still learn today. I'm taking college courses tonight when I get home to learn even more things. And I found out that I learned something new every day. And it's building. The more, someone said, Mark Twain, I think, says, the more you know, the more you know you don't know. And so I've gotten into that cycle now, just trying to find more and more things to know.
To me, education is an opportunity, and I think it's an opportunity that in the United States a lot of kids don't take advantage of, and it's an opportunity that a lot of kids don't even get in other countries. So it's something that I try to take advantage of, and I want to further my education in college and just gain as much knowledge as possible because I think it really is a great opportunity.
Education means the freedom to strive for your goals and your dreams and fight for what you want to do in life.
Education is something that to me is so important. I know that a lot of kids that are in school don't really appreciate it, but I think that when you look around, especially at other countries, we are really, really lucky to have the education system that we do. We go to school for free until we're adults. We're 18 years old. And to have that is really a gift. Education is so important because it can't be taken away from you. It's something that when you get it, it's yours forever, and you can do so many things with it. It opens up so many doors and so many opportunities for you.
Education is everything to me. There's so little you can do in life, especially in the modern world, anywhere in the world, if you don't have an education. Assuming that it's an education that's well-rounded and you're actually looking at facts and comparing what facts are and not. I think especially in our world today, the idea of what a fact is a little bit lacking, and I think it's really important that people be able to tell those differences.
I believe education is an engine. It drives the economy. If we don't have people that are educated, that can go out and innovate and make things happen, then we might be falling behind, economically behind. If you looked at all of our great economic boost, it's been associated with something that had to do with people being educated and able to do things that have never been done before.
Well, I mean, education is what prepares the workforce to be the workforce that the economy needs it to be. So we have shifted from an industrial economy to a service economy. Education, but you can't expect workers to have that skill set just in their pocket. So education is a way for them to adjust with that space, because if you don't, then those workers they won't be able to work by no fault of their own. So.
It probably varies from country to country, but definitely in a country like the United States, we have so many jobs today that are dependent on high levels of education. So if we don't have people getting high levels of education, then our economy definitely doesn't develop to its full extent. So definitely our economy today and education go hand in hand.
A lot. Especially in terms of the way things are going in the future today. We have a lot less industry jobs that are, for example, they use the term blue collar, but people who don't have a college education who are working in factories, and a lot of machines are doing those now. So an education is huge in helping find people new avenues to pursue in the economy, to keep the economy moving and to keep the economy going. And of course, the more educated you are, the more options you have and the more chances you have to contribute and keep it going.
I think in third world countries, education is a great way to make it out of your country, especially if your country is really poor and there aren't a lot of other opportunities in your country to further yourself in business or in education, things like that. So I think it's a way to make it out of your country.
That is the biggest thing, actually. I've done a lot of research and studying on women's rights and education in the world. And there's a fabulous book called Half the Sky that talks about basically to end world poverty, you educate women. Because women put their money into more education for their children, and that's really the one way to bring yourself up in the world, is to have something other people don't, and that's something people can't take away from you.
Well, my father's from a third world country, and from being there for some time and seeing how education functions there, it is very much a starting point. It's a for them, education functions as a way to lay a foundation on which they can build and develop their country. My father's country in particular has a problem with having an uneducated, impoverished lower class, and that's a very easily manipulated population, so they don't necessarily understand what's happening politically and economically in their country. They just know what they hear on the radio, for example, and I think that's really dangerous, so they need a better foundation should they want to move forward.
For third world countries, it's complicated because there are a lot of other variables that play into it. We've definitely seen some countries where increasing education leads to a lot of economic growth, but there's no guarantee for that. For that to be true, you also have to have a stable political system so that people feel safe to open businesses and to invest. You have to have limited amounts of government corruption, otherwise too much money is spent paying bribes rather than actually opening businesses. So education is a good step for many countries, but by itself it doesn't guarantee that their economy is going to grow or that it's going to fix the poverty they might be facing.
In third world countries, education is not prevalent. When you have charitable organizations asking for donations or for sponsorships, sponsorships, that's the thing, or asking for sponsorships, something that they ask for is education, and that is up there ranked among healthcare and resources like water and food. Education is something, when you look at it in that perspective, it's something that's so important, especially for these kids who don't get it. In third world countries, kids are, if they find themselves in that situation without any sort of sponsorship, or if their parents aren't working, even if their parents are working, they're probably not making enough money for school. And these kids basically are kind of destined to not have a bright future because they can't get to an education. And education, for that to come into play in these kids' lives, would be a massive change. You wouldn't see poverty, as great as it is. You wouldn't see starvation or malnutrition as high as it is. You wouldn't see disease as prevalent as it is in third world countries either.
So in first world countries, education I think needs to be focused on because of the opportunity that we have, and with that you can prosper as a society within the country but also help other societies prosper as well. Providing the next generation with proper knowledge is really like the only way we can expect reforms in fields of study or innovative ideas to come out of that.
I think that goes back to what I was saying about the economy in the United States. Our economy and education definitely are highly correlated to each other. The more our citizens become educated, the faster our economy will be able to grow. And that's true throughout the first world.
Well, so a first world country doesn't necessarily need a foundation so much anymore, so much as a means by which to move forward. Education is not stagnant because the nation that educates the population is not stagnant. So as the country develops and as the country moves into the future, education should follow suit, because if not, then the population of the nation is going to be unprepared to tackle future issues.
It depends on how teachers teach it. If every teacher taught not just to have kids pass the SOL, not just for kids just to pass a test, and not just taught the curriculum that an SOL has or an AP, like the AP curriculum has, if they taught just for the sake of teaching kids and having them know and learn and being able to see something a different way, then a lot greater would come from the education in first world countries. But the sad truth is most teachers teach just to a curriculum, just to help kids pass an SOL or help pass an AP test. And
in politics, I think it's possibly one of the most important, because typically the majority of individuals base their knowledge off of what they hear on the news or what they see, and voice an opinion that either has like a negative or positive bias won't allow you to go out and figure out the facts on your own. So you'll be living life under this assumption of what you heard, and they can't always be facts.
We see definitely different forms of democracy throughout most of the planet today, and for democracy to work well, you really need an educated citizenry. You need citizens who understand the past so they can make reasonable predictions about the future. You need citizens who understand the planet that they're a part of. We definitely see democracies in places where people don't have a high level of education, but those tend to be democracies that malfunction in some way. Those are democracies where a demagogue might be able to get elected by saying crazy things. If you have high levels of education, though, it tends to lead to more political stability within a democracy.
In politics, education allows politics to happen in the way that we have designed our political system to happen.
I think that if you become neutrally educated and you're not biased when you're first learning about politics and about being liberal or being conservative, that it really helps you to come in with like an open mind, and if you're taught about it by the right person, then you can really form your opinions on your own, and you're not opinionated by another person, whoever teaches you about politics.
Yeah, I think the same. The more educated we are, I think that we should be smart voters. And so education certainly helps with that. And I also think it helps with, many times we grow up and we believe what our parents believe, because that's how we've grown up and that's what we've been taught at home. And so having that education and maybe hearing and seeing a different side and how it's affected the world in the past will help us to make smarter and more informed decisions.
Well, we always talk about how, you need to learn from your mistakes, and we haven't really figured that out yet, so we really need to do that so that when in conflict we can know our history and we can know how to fix it and how we've handled it before and what has worked and what hasn't worked, so that we can resolve our conflicts in better ways than we have.
Especially depending on the kind of education, like if you're looking, for example, at Israel and Palestine, which is a very, very divisive issue. Educating on both sides, I think, gives people a lot more empathy and understanding about, it's not just one-sided. People are people on both sides and facing these various things, and learning about why those things happen, how those things can be prevented, and how you can help try to resolve them.
Well, education helps us understand all sides and all perspectives so we can make an educated decision when there is conflict.
I think if one is educated, you won't allow offensive things to really get to the point of violence. I think that there are so many opinions out there that frustrate me personally, and I think that with understanding that, as irritating as it is, typically that individual isn't really, they're either miseducated or they just don't know what they're really talking about. And so with them being highly misinformed, I think that the only way that you can change that is by informing them of the facts and the truth.
Okay, so it actually does two things. Okay, and then so education has the ability to, like, keep the political forces that instigate these conflicts and stuff in place. Because if you, for example, if a Western nation educates its population from a Western lens, usually is very anti-East. So conflict between the West and the Middle East, for example, is going to continue because the population believes that they are superior because the East is backwards and things like that. So it actually can serve to keep conflict going. However, in the same way it can do that, it also can function to stop it, and if not stop it entirely, stop the forces in play that like demand that it keeps going. So if we educate our population not that the West is superior in any means, but that simply the West is different, and that's okay, and the East is different and that's okay, it can lessen, I think, the conflict and also the response to conflict. For example, Aleppo would probably be a lot more humanitarian, a lot more understanding. Or they would see people as human as opposed to another.
Yeah, when it comes to conflict and war and fighting, education is such a powerful tool that we can use to kind of find solutions to those things. I think that with education comes understanding. I think that the more you know, especially about the world and about the people around you, the more you'll be able to kind of put yourself in their shoes and be more open to solutions that you probably wouldn't be open to if you didn't know about these people or understand them well.
That's an interesting question. What are the flaws? Some of the flaws, there tries to be a one-size-fits-all.
Really, I think the biggest flaw here is that our education is based around getting the A, and a lot of times that's all kids work for. It's not really about becoming more knowledgeable or changing the way you think. It's all about getting an A or passing advanced or passing the SOLs.
It's hard to say because one of the problems I think, at least as a teacher, that frustrates me is that a lot of good teachers are brought down by our current system. You guys are very lucky at Liberty in that you have a lot of very fabulous teachers who these whole state tests, people say, oh, well, don't teach the test. Well, I've got kids that have special needs that won't graduate if they don't pass that test. So basically, we are trying to fit everybody into the same mold. And this idea that testing is going to work, it's no real life application. There is no synthesis of information. And to fit in my whole content in 4 months and then have kids pass a test is ridiculous. It drives me crazy.
I think there's a number of flaws. Like, take for example the number of teachers that teach students the wrong information. From a personal standpoint, the school that I previously attended, I felt as though everything I had been taught was centered around the progression of one particular race, and it isn't right, as though there are so many other progressions of other races and their civilizations that they've managed to keep alive for so many years. And I think that with the right teacher, you're able to open your eyes to the information that nobody really talks about and the real issues in our society, like how did things end up this way, and like how did they start, and being able to piece that together.
I think we have two big problems right now in our education system. One of the biggest problems in our education system is that funding is mostly done with local property taxes. That basically guarantees that wealthier areas are going to be able to afford great schools, and poor areas are stuck with schools that can barely work, and they're not able to attract highly qualified teachers because they can't pay them well. And so we sort of have a public education system that is built to perpetuate inequality between different areas. The other big problem I think that we have is, if we go back a few decades, there was great teaching going on in a lot of schools, and then there was also really weak teaching. And so politicians got involved, and they said, how can we make sure that every single teacher is teaching something? And this led to a lot of standards-based grading, and it led to a lot of end-of-course tests that are mandated by states, not just in Virginia, but in many states now. And that in itself wasn't a bad idea, but I feel like a lot of the standardized tests that were created don't match what we really want students to be able to do.
The standardized testing, I think we focus too much on, because there's a lot of kids that struggle with testing mainly, and so if they fail a test, it doesn't show how smart they are.
I think we focus a little too much on time testing and being able to do things like without resources that we have, like without calculators or without researching things. And I think that's kind of dumb in a way because we have so many things that are available to us. We have the internet where we can look everything up, and to limit us to be able to use that is kind of an odd thing.
Education is not a one-size-fits-all thing. You know, we come to a building every day, and we go to these classes every day. And other than some electives where you have some choice, it's the same classes, right? You go to math, you go to English, you go to history, you go to science. Those are your 4 required. You have so many that you're required. I don't think that's for everyone. I think that we need to have more choice in our education. I think we need to have more freedom in our education. I think we need to have less lecture and more hands-on, real-world problem-solving, things that are going to take you into the future and be able to adapt and change with our changing future. And I also think that there are some students that maybe they need to be learning a trade. You know, if they want to be a mechanic or a farmer or, you know, then the traditional education is not necessarily for them. And I think we fail them where that is concerned. And I think they're, especially in this area, because we're in such a rural area, this is a perfect example. We have a lot of students in this school that I think would be so much better suited taking a different route with their education and kind of learning the hands-on skills that they're going to need in their future, and not the traditional, here you go, you're going to take these classes for these 4 years and then you're going to go to college and you're going to get this job. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. I think that we need to be a lot more flexible and allow students a lot more freedom and choice.
The flaws that I see in the education system, or the flaws that I understand that exist in the education system, are such that there are 2 things I think that I want to talk about. One of them is the fact that our schools are, because of the way that education is designed in the United States, our schools are segregated, not legal. Schools experience segregation not by like a legal means, but they are de facto segregated because our education, like the quality of education you get in the United States, very much depends on where you live. So because they are locally funded. So and if you have a series of a history that has a history of disenfranchising black people from 400 years of slavery to Jim Crow to the fact that the civil rights movement even had to be a thing, they are going to be in areas that have less resources, have less funding, and because schools are funded by their local taxes, they're not going to have resources for those schools. And then, and that's not the fault of the children in the school. So like that is a huge thing. Also, we practice tracking, which is a huge thing. So do you know what tracking is? Okay, so tracking is so if you think about like in high school, you have you can look at a kid and you're like, okay, you can kind of see like where that kid's gonna go in high school, and that's not by mistake. So for example, like a guidance counselors and teachers will like evaluate children and decide, okay, well he like can't do advanced math, he can't do advanced science and everything, so they'll put them on lower tracks. And then so what that does, that divides the population so it's easier for like teachers to handle and stuff. But what that does is that reproduces the hegemony or the current state of being of the society, because usually the kids who get put on lower tracks are put on lower tracks because they don't have resources at home to get the type of scores that their peers get. They are usually minority students because there's an implicit bias within the people who design the tracks and people who place people on tracks. And so that's, for example, why you could walk into a classroom, you can kind of tell what level of education, like what, if it's an honors class or not, and that's not by mistake, and that's a problem. And what that does is that takes people who are from lower class, under-resourced backgrounds, gives them less skills and less preparation for college, and then spits them out, and then they are less prepared to get like a higher education. so then they just fall back into the cycle that their family was.
So it really depends too on where you're looking. Obviously, in places like third world countries, you're seeing the issues where a lot of people can't afford schools, and so that's not necessarily just a flaw in the system; it's a funding problem that needs to be fixed. There are other places like Japan where you've got year-round school, or you have really long days, and there's this very focus on high stakes learning, and I don't think that's really the way to go either. I think you need some kind of system that gives people options. In certain countries like France, you take a test when you're in high school, whether you're going to go to university or not. I also think that pigeonholes people too much, because for me personally, I didn't really become particularly academic until I went to college, and I was like, oh, this whole new world. But I think you need to give the option of, like in the UK, they do that where you can say, okay, well, you can either go for 2 more years or you can go into the workforce. And some people go into the workforce and then decide, okay, I want to go back and go to university, and then that's an option there. So I think that's a better way to go.
Well, in other countries, sometimes it's not required. Education isn't required.
Yeah, like the biggest problem I think with education in other countries is I think it has less. They're under resourced, but like even if it's not in terms of funding, it's in terms of the human capital that stays there. For example, like the United States has the Genius Visa, so there's a reason why we're like 30th for like math and like stuff like that. But we have like the highest innovation and stuff for like the last couple of decades, and that's because people who are really highly educated in other countries come here because we have the resources, not because we have the education. So they get educated somewhere else and they come here. And so like the problem with education in other countries that they fail to provide incentives for those people to stay in that country. So you get less experience like teachers, professors, and that makes for a less prepared workforce for like a global for a globalized world. So
to be honest with you, I'm not really aware of how other countries teach there, but from what I've read up on in many articles over the years is that it really depends on what how society is viewed upon. A lot of cultural aspects prevents certain genders not to go to school. Like there's very dominated roles in certain societies that women, such as women, are basically meant to be in a household, and that's usually not the case. Every gender and every person should have access to an education, or especially the resources to get to that point.
Yeah, I think that the only sort of research that I've done on an area when it comes to education would definitely be sub-Saharan Africa. Big surprise. In countries like Uganda and Togo and Sierra Leone, these countries face the fact that education is not the most important thing. The most important thing for a lot of these families is survival, and it's getting meals. Their thought is not, how am I going to pay for school? It's how am I going to get food on the table, or how are we going to get water this week? I think that education it's unreachable for some of these families. And it's not expensive. It's really not. But the small amount of money that it is too much for these families. And I don't know if that's exactly a flaw in the education system. But if we could somehow enforce to these families how important education actually is, and to do something to help these families, more than what's already being done through charity and donations. If we could do something more beyond that to enforce to these families just how important education is, because it really is the ticket for these kids to get out of these situations.
Well, every person is unique and different, so I think education has to be differentiated for different individuals.
I think like it is now, how it's pretty much standardized for everyone, it's not the best way to go about it, but I don't really see a way that we can make it specific person by person. I think it would be very expensive and nearly impossible to do, but I guess it's possible to try and break education down into smaller groups. Maybe instead of having large class sizes like 25 people, it's really hard for a teacher to connect with each person and give them separate times. So maybe if we had class sizes near like 10 or even in the single digits, obviously it would cost more money because we'd have to have more teachers, but I think that as a whole, it would improve everyone's education because it would be more specific, but not 100% specific.
I think I've actually I teach some collaborative classes, so I teach with a special ed teacher for some days. And what we do is, I think, a kind of middle line approach. The whole standardized for everybody is ridiculous. That's never going to work. And we've seen it not work. But also then doing individually each person is pretty ridiculous as well, and that's getting a little too entitled, perhaps, if it should be my way. What we essentially do is we look at the different strengths of people, and we say, okay, well, this particular student does well in this, and then basically, and for one, getting rid of all these tests, but then being able to work with different students' abilities and have, instead of like individualized, but like have groups, like group A, group B, group C, and what areas that they're good at.
To have it be standardized, it's not fair for everyone, but to have it be made specific by person, that'd be expensive, and it would be hard to figure out, because to have a specific education for just one person would be hard. But I think a great mixture between like having some sort of standardized, but being able to teach the different knowledge, the different learning aspects.
Definitely specific by person, because everyone learns at different speeds. So if we have a really gifted person with a lot of potential, they'll need some classes that will challenge them more and reach their full potential. But if someone's behind and they need extra help just to get through high school and then go into college, we should have a system that allows them to do that.
Definitely made specific. That kind of goes back to my comment before about education is not a one-size-fits-all. I really think that we need to offer students more freedom in their choice, really starting at the middle school level, but most definitely at the high school level. I don't think you should have to wait until you're done with high school to decide. I think you should be able to almost custom fit your education to what you want to do, what you want to be, and that should be able to change and adapt and grow as you change and adapt and grow.
I definitely think it should be catered to every individual, because nothing can really go wrong with properly educating yourself.
I believe knowledge does give you an advantage, and an advantage gives you the opportunity to achieve power.
Knowledge is power. I definitely agree with that quote. I think that knowledge and education is so important to every person. It doesn't matter who you are, how old you are, where you're from, what your financial situation is. I think that education is one of the most important things that a person can have. It affects you so much as a person. You're not the same person that you were before you started learning. Okay, and people learn every day. And I think that if we valued education in that sense, the fact that it's one of the most important things that we can have.
Yes, because all the powerful people in this world, politically or non-politically, they all have some type of education, or a lot of education and a lot of knowledge. So if you know a lot, you're more likely to be in power than a person that doesn't know a lot.
It is amazing, and it really is. Especially the older you get, you will see. Really, what you know opens so many doors. If you look at any political system or any high-powered job in the world, I mean, people that are in the know, they're the ones that control things. But also, one of the things that I think is really important throughout the whole scheme of history, I mean, people can take your dignity, they can take your rights, but they cannot take your knowledge. That's one thing that never leaves.
Knowledge is power. Yeah, I think I agree with that. You definitely feel, well, sometimes I think the word power has a negative connotation, but I would change it to knowledge is empowering. Power makes it sound like very authoritative and like just overruling others, but empowering means that you really have what's necessary to make improvements, and I think that's a more positive way to look at it.
I would add one more thing to this, and this is very just like super Foucauldian. It's that discourse is knowledge is power, and like basically what I mean by that is that we don't have knowledge of things until we develop language for them.
One of my middle school teachers, she really she made it seem like it wasn't even a job that she was teaching him. She made it seem fun, and like a lot of people like don't want to go to school and like don't want to do college, but she like made me want to. She made me want to go to school every day, and she just made it so fun, and she really connected us with the class.
I had the coolest opportunity when I was in high school. This was back when, I'm from Michigan, when we were still funded. Apparently it's no longer a thing. But our sophomore year we did U.S. history and U.S. literature. And so what it was a class called Humanities. And it was American history, art, literature, and music. And so we didn't have a block schedule, we had like hours. So they took 2 of our hours of the day, and it was like team teaching, which I'm a huge proponent. If you get good teachers that work together, team teaching is the way to go. But we were actually learning about, the music and the art and the literature and the music all together, and it wasn't like, oh, we're going to compartmentalize here, here, and here. It was like, oh, wait, this stuff all fits together. And that absolutely really revolutionized for me a lot of learning and how I want to be able to do that for my students as well.
Well, I actually had my English teacher in 8th grade. Pretty much every lesson that he gave us was impactful. We always tried to make sure that we weren't just learning about things, we were also learning to become better men and women, and that we're just generally improving as a whole, not just intellectually, but as people too, and learning how to be good people and how to be nice and how to care for one another. And he had honestly a huge impact in my life. He made me want to come to school every day and want to get to his class, and he just taught me so much about life and what it means to be a man.
Yeah, so the most impactful lesson, everybody's going to know who I'm talking about, but I won't name any names, was definitely, it was this semester. One of my teachers, we were beginning the Sub-Saharan African unit. And Sub-Saharan Africa is my favorite unit of life. But when we were beginning it, we didn't know we were starting it. He had each of us pick the person that we love and care about most in the world. And when we did that, we went around the room before the lesson took a turn that I'm not going to go into. We went around the room and we talked about this person. And we laughed and we cried. And it was after we were done, and we were all really emotional, that he presented it to us.
My high school government teacher, his name was George Jr., actually. And he was by far the teacher who had the most influence on me. In high school, I didn't love history and social studies, but I loved his class. And it was because first of all, he built a great relationship with his students. And that, to me, was very important. I felt like he knew me. I felt like I could trust him. But also, the way he presented his material, it was just different. He taught us, in the way that he presented it to us, he taught us how important it was, and he taught us the value of, making informed, good decisions, and he made us feel like, we were the future, and we had to know and understand and be educated about our government system and about politics and about the issues in order to make good, informed decisions. And, he made us feel like what we thought and what we said really mattered.
I think the most impactful teacher I had is Mr. Obraka in our AP World Civ class. Because prior to his class, I actually really hated history. Everything about it was really centered around the wrongs of indigenous people and the so-called amazing wars and the lack of inclusion of the rest of the world. And it was just so much centered around the West. And the value I found in this class was that even in the worst of truth and the things that our species has done, there's light in that, and there's a chance to change and really prosper as a species. And he told us in the beginning of the year that with so much of the negative that he has learned about the horrible things in our history, he still manages to have that hope that change is possible. And at first I didn't really understand that because I didn't have a really good outlook when it came to history. But slowly, when he revealed layers of the worst truths of our species, I finally understood the effect that it can have on someone's mind. It can be really hard to keep your composure when there's so many horrible things that have been done to people. But I think that when you sort of train yourself to look for the positives and to hope for the best and really kind of apply it to your own life and just kind of think to yourself, like, what is something that I can do that could probably make a difference in either my life or someone else's life? I think that can really bring out like the best in an individual.
And in high school, I had 2 teachers who made a huge impact on me. This would be Sean Brumbaugh and Raymond Greco. They were both science teachers, but it wasn't the subject that they taught. Those 2 men both did a really great job of teaching to the whole student. And I felt like when I was in their class, I wasn't just a student in their class, but I was being mentored by someone who really wanted to help me in every possible way as a human being, and not just in learning science. Having those 2 teachers really inspired me, I think, to become a teacher.
Actually, for me, I think, like, as much as I'm like in my head, I'm like, oh, like this is my favorite teacher, this is my favorite class. There was actually like the second semester of the first semester. It's the first semester, I think. Were we in government first semester? I think so. But the first semester of senior year, I had capstone and then government, like capstone, government AP, and then macroeconomics AP. So it was like the Obrachta.
Gosh, we love Mark.
Yeah, it was the Obrachtas and Mr. Patterson. Then I had Chem AP at the end. That was awful. But anyways, so like it was interesting because every day like I spent about 5.5 hours studying people and how they work, and also having them back to back to back like that every day. It allowed me to see like how everything was so interconnected. So like what happens geopolitically is determined and also affects our political system, which in turn affects economics, which then affects like geopolitical. It's like this huge mess of stuff, and I loved it. I loved it, and like, was it really easy to like sit there for 5.5 hours and study everything that's wrong with the world? Like, no. There were actually like some really like tough moments, and Mr. Brackett probably knows what I'm talking about. Like when it came to certain people and that come from certain backgrounds that were very different from mine, and things like that. And I think that having those like literally like anywhere from 15 to 25 hours like a week just like studying people really impacted my entire like life, because that's now what I want to do for undergrad and graduate school. So
my World History 2 class, my World History 2 AP class, the teacher really gave me a different outlook on life and how humans think and how we work as a society, and how we can't just hold hands and sing Kumbaya and everything will be okay. And it really made me think. He didn't just teach not to a standardized test. He didn't just teach just to have people, just learn and become better. He taught to make you think. He wanted to make you think about how it impacts people, and not just well, this happened, and not just why did this happen, but he wanted you to really think about the things that led up to it, and how maybe it could have been different, and how it's so important to how it relates to us today.
The most impactful lesson wasn't capstone, and it's the beginning of the Africa unit, and Mr. Arakta does a phenomenal job of introducing it. And as well as that whole unit, not just like a certain lesson, that whole unit really was in depth of it tells the dark history of Africa, but also it shows the light through a unique way that he taught it, a very humanity-based way, and how we learned both sides of the issue, and gained our own perspective from that.
yeah, absolutely. I also want to point out that capstone is also a very self-selecting class, and this actually is an issue also within university as well, that people who are more willing to learn things like this and also know a little bit more about things like this are tend to be the people who take that class. However, people that really should be in that class and should really would really benefit, from being introduced to things in that class, do not even think about taking that class. And so I think that Capstone is like a really important class for everyone to take.
I definitely agree that senior capstone is it should be recommended to nearly every senior that comes through here at Liberty High School, because Mr. Proctor does a very outstanding job with the course of curriculum and all that, and he kind of deviates from the standard way of teaching, in which he basically establishes a very solid foundation with the historical content, and from that you grow as a person. He provides all the resources for you to gain a very knowledgeable perspective upon the actions and situations that have passed over the years.
I 100% think that senior capstone is worth it. Yeah, it's a lot of work. I think that sometimes that's all people see it as. It's senior capstone, you write essays, But it's so much more than that. It's probably one of the deepest classes I've ever taken. There's so much substance and depth there. And I think that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your opinions are, your beliefs are, it doesn't matter how much of a worldview that you have. You go into Capstone and you come out a different person. I know that it's true for myself, I know that it's true for my friends and the people that have taken it. It changes you as a person. It makes you want to know people better and want to understand people better. It makes you understand that there are things that are going on in the world that you're not being taught. And to have a class where you sit down and you learn about these things, and it's hard, and you cry, and you feel it, and it hurts, but to know these things is so special and it's so important. And I would 100% give the credit to our teacher.
Almost said his name.
Dean Obrachta. I would 100% give the credit back to the teacher who conducted the class. He made the class so worth it, and so special and important and so deep.
Education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. Like most people nowadays, take our region for example. We come to school and we're always I hate coming to school, stuff like that. But there's kids around the world who would die to be in the situation we are. They're so willing to learn. They'll do anything they can, and their families are so supportive of them. And here, we just don't have that same drive. We'd be able to do so much more, and if we just had that willpower.
Yeah.
And education isn't preparation for your life. Education is your life
Yeah.
in the U.S.
I'm pretty sure we're all kind of in consensus that they teach a lot for the standardized knowledge.
To a test.
Yeah, they teach
Teaching
to a
to a
test and not to what they should be teaching to.
One of my favorite responses that we got during our interviews was, and I feel like a lot of people kind of said the same thing, that we don't need it specific by person or whatever, but we can't do it exactly the same for everyone because it's just not going to work. We need somewhere in between. And one of the best solutions I heard to that was really having smaller class sizes, because I think if you have a smaller class size, your teacher gets to know you and how you learn, and they can really teach to the strengths kind of their students.
And one of the flaws that I saw, and I loved how Melissa explained it, the tracking, that you can see it especially in our region, and in school every day, there's different groups. There's kids that those kids that will go to college, and those kids that will just stay in the region their whole lives, and if the teachers and guidance would really help with that, to cut back on some of that maybe.
Literally most of my teachers.
Every teacher.
Every teacher I feel we've had, each and every teacher I think has had an impact on how, who we are today.
Because teachers, when you decide you want to teach, you don't do it for the money. You don't do it for like.
Literally, you do not do it for the money.
You
Like,
do it because you want to teach, because you want to help kids grow as not only as a student with their education, but as a person.
okay, so my kindergarten teacher, she had me and my brother, and she was super sweet. She always had the dum dum tree, like
Let's go.
lollipops.
Let's keep it to grade.
Okay. First grade, third grade. No, kindergarten, third grade. And then some of my 6th, 7th, 8th grade teachers, a majority of my high school teachers. Like, everybody rocks. It's awesome.
And many more to come.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, with thanking just all of our teachers ever, like, a specific, like, thanks to the social studies department at Liberty High School.
Oh my gosh, Liberty
We
just
have-
has really great teachers. I
Yeah, in general, we have really good teachers, but I really think that the social studies department has done a really great job in picking, like,
They
the
ha-
best teachers possible. Like, every teacher I've had in the social studies department
Was amazing.
it was a pretty great, yeah.
And then my advanced functions and modeling teacher, you know who you are.
For me, especially my 3rd grade teacher, she like when I talk to like some of my friends, they're always like, I don't want to be here today, or just like, I wish I stayed home.
Mm-hmm.
She really gave me that drive to come to school every day and like really want to learn. And like, I know that was so long ago. Like, I'm 17 now, and 3rd grade felt like
It's like 2 years ago.
felt like forever ago. But like, I'm just really thankful. That was her first year teaching as well, and it just, I really loved her class. Like, just going to school every day, and I had her for like the whole day. 3rd grade, you didn't change, so it really meant a lot.
I think the teacher I want to talk about was probably a teacher I had last year, and she no longer works at Liberty, but, like, I think that what made her teaching so impactful to me is that she, like, first of all, we had a really small class. It was my African American Studies class, and we had, like, 8 or 9 people. Like, it was such a small group of kids, but she really, like, took time to get to know each and every one of us, and she was so, like, kind. And we talked about a lot of really sensitive subjects in that class, and, like, she just really made us think about them and, like, think about our country as a whole and, like, how we treat people and how that's so important. Like, and I think that that's really impacted me as a person, like, growing as a person. Like, she really made me see that being kind to everyone and taking time to, like, know someone's backstory is, like, really important in general. And that was a really impactful class to me, and she's a really impactful person in my life.
I agree. Like, if you have a teacher who's like, you know, believes in you and, like, know that they're going to support you basically no matter what, not always, but for the most part, they're going to be behind you because they know that, like, how you are as a person and how, like, motivated and, like, passionate and driven you are, is a really big thing. And Social Studies Department at Liberty, you guys do a great job. My World History 2 teacher, my World History 1 and Macroeconomics teacher, and then now my capstone teacher, they just have, like, a really great way about not only making you passionate about things that you maybe didn't think you were going to be passionate about, but things that you wouldn't really see yourself thinking about. They, like, have a really good way of making you, like, be, like, put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're thinking about or the people that you're talking about, and making you see it from other perspectives, and just caring about people and caring about the things you say and the things you do and how they'll impact the world. And they always encourage you, and, like, they know that every student has potential, like, not just the ones who you know for a fact are going to pass their SOLs. The ones that maybe aren't going to pass their SOLs still have as much, like, potential to offer. Like, they just always are really encouraging and, like, put a lot of heart into their content, what they're teaching, and they really, like, know how to not treat students as students but as peers. And in a, like, you still know that they're your teacher and you still respect them as a teacher, but they show you this respect not, like, condescendingly, like, look, you're a
treat
human.
you as people.
Yeah, it's just really cool to have teachers who see your potential and treat you as an adult and just, like,
And who actually care about you.
yeah, like, genuinely care.
It does really make a difference if you can genuinely tell that a teacher cares about your education and cares about you as a person. Like, I feel like that is, like, going along with, like, the smaller class sizes, like, it is so, I feel like it's really important if you want to make an impact on your students to, like, really show them that you care about their education and about them as people.
Freaking yes!
That's the coolest
Take it.
thing. That's like
Literally.
the coolest thing.
Yes.
Take senior capstone.
Take senior capstone.
It's a
It should
great
be a
course.
mandatory class. It teaches you about things that you typically don't think of.
And like me personally, I love Capstone. It's like every day I look forward to going to school and starting off with
Is that funny?
starting off Capstone right, and like we can talk about like what's going on around us, like, and it's not like a normal classroom. Like you don't have to. He doesn't teach for an SOL. We don't have to worry about meeting like state standards or something like that. We can talk about what our teacher thinks is important around the world, and I just love walking into that room every day, have a smile on my face, and just knowing I'll learn something new. I'll have a good time with great people
It'll
around
be
me.
funny and informative, and you'll care, and you'll probably cry, but there'll be food and candy, and you may not agree with everyone in the classroom, but it's a safe environment for everyone to speak their minds.
Thank you, Mr. Rocco. We love you.